Is it? Okay, let's go. Let's bring them in. And we're live. And great. Well, welcome to the TPG Leadership Series. We are talking about, can your CEO use financial metrics to drive peak performance across the organization, not just looking at the impact of those on the finance department, but can the CEO use the right metrics to drive results across manufacturing, sales, marketing, operations? And with us today, we have some very special guests. Let me first introduce my co-host, a gentleman who really helps bring us the digital aspect of the business together, looking at digital transformations across the region. He's a man who has had his metal tested in Silicon Valley itself, where he was a .com startup in Silicon Valley, worked for big companies there as well, like Sun Microsystems, and then moved into vice president of IT for Bank of America, where he helped with their digitization program, and then moved back to Jordan, where he became the chief information officer for the Bank of Jordan. And then he started Digital Analytica, a company headquartered in Las Vegas, Nevada, with offices in the Middle East. He is Mr. Nasser Zega, the CEO and founder of Digital Analytica. Please give him a warm welcome, folks.
Thank you, Chin. I'm so excited to be on this call today. And thanks for the introduction as well. Next time, let me do the honors and introduce you to the audience.
Yeah, maybe one time. But for those of you wondering why I'm here, basically, my father started our company in 1984. We've been placing board members and CEOs for almost 36 years. And we have a real deep passion for a CEO assessment, and what really makes a business great is its people. What are the key psychological markers you want to look at when you're hiring top performers? And luckily, we have a lot of guidance and support from gurus like our special guest that we have with us today, a man who is really a legend within the Middle East. He is a true financial guru, no question about it. He is a bona fide, veritable financial guru. And he is a man that chairmen and boards will grab onto in their darkest hour, when they really don't have the answers to the most difficult questions. They bring this gentleman in. He has been voted as a revolutionary CFO of the year. He has been voted as the most admired CFO in the Middle East. He was the chief financial officer for Arab Tech. He was later the chief executive officer for Faki IVF, where he completed one of the largest healthcare transactions at 1.85 billion dirhams. And he's been listed as one of the top 500 most influential Arabs in the world. He was healthcare CEO of the year, just to name a few. Please welcome Mr. Ziad Makazumi.
Welcome. Thank you, Shane. Thank you. Thank you for this exaggerated introduction, but it's well appreciated. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you with us. And I was really flattered that you would help in this area, which is the financial metrics. And sorry about that. It looks like my phone is still on. That's a bit of a taboo. Let me just turn that off. But one of the areas that I always gravitate to when I meet somebody and I want to figure out, hey, is this person actually good at what they do? I always jump on the metrics. So for example, you take a very simple example. Someone says, hey, I'm a personal trainer. Well, how do we know if that person is an Olympic quality personal trainer or just someone who's having fun? And you just ask them, how much potassium should I be having in the morning before I work out? What do you think my magnesium, how many milligrams of magnesium should I have? And so when you start dealing with a very professional trainer, they'll start telling you how much magnesium, potassium, how many grams of protein. And that's where you start to see the divide. And so when we're dealing with our CEOs, I always like to get into the metrics. And very quickly, I feel, and we have a real live guru here with us. So, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Ziad, but somebody who doesn't know their metrics, to me, they don't know their business. And so that's what I'm going to cover. in this quick presentation. And it's a big turnoff to me when people, if I ask them what metrics do you use to measure your business, and they say revenue and net profit. Ziad, what do you think? Do you feel that these metrics are?
But first of all, I just want to say, the world is changing so much now that only one side knowledge or so one side historic data is not enough. The world is changing, and recently, because of Corona, we've seen that even whatever we planned for 2008 financial crisis doesn't work anymore. And we've been hit with this virtual enemy who destroyed our social, cultural, corporate, legal, healthcare, you name it. The Corona has shown how weak our systems are. Again, we're talking about the book that I've written about intelligent learning. Matrices are part of that. We have to look at things. So me as a CEO, personally, I cannot just look at the results and look at the numbers. I need to understand the operation. And I would say a strategy is not just one strategy. It's a series of strategies that have to run in parallel. It's financial, it's marketing, it's operational, it's logistics, it's supply. And recently, it's proven that even your technology strategy, if you're not a proper platform, you cannot survive in this world. The world is moving towards a digital reality that we have to do. So a CEO who does not understand a balance sheet or a P&L does not understand what the value of a stock being in the warehouse for 6 weeks instead of 2 is. They cannot understand where the revenue stream is coming in. I'm telling you that CEO will not survive in the business because the business itself will not survive, in my view. So financial matrices are important, but there are other measures they have to look at. Average spend time, average collection time. It's not just purely financial. I think every business could be divided into chunks that are measurable. Some of it you have to make assumptions on, and as we go along, and Corona has proven that, we have to invent new matrices. So a CEO who does not understand the numbers, and I'm not just talking about financial, I guarantee you will not survive long term.
Absolutely. And so in this presentation, we're going to cover some case studies, and we have some, I'm sure Ziad will have some very interesting stories to tell. We're going to review some industry standard financial metrics and look at the impact of not using financial metrics, and then questions to ask in your CEO interview. So at the end of the session, you'll be able to run better CEO assessments, better CEO interviews right at the back of this. So here's a very interesting case study. I found this one. This was like a real story, and we're working with this group. They've been growing their top line sales, but their net profit had been shrinking. So, and I think that's a percentage of their net profit. So, rather than have a 10% net profit, it would go to 8%. But because they were growing the top line, there was still a net increase in the cash, or in the net cash value of the net profit, but the percentage was dropping. And so they brought a new CEO to fix this. What did the executive do? Obviously, you can't know that without me telling you, so I'm just skip to that. So the main thing that he did was he changed the metrics that were being used, and instead the company was measuring a ton of equipment sold, and they changed that to profit per ton. And this reoriented the whole training program for the sales team to really educate them on which pieces of equipment had the highest net margins. And then when they were dealing with the customer account, the customer's still going to spend $1 million with them in terms of purchasing equipment, or $5 million. But the sales executive then was able to suggest products that are going to optimize the profit orientation of the customer account. And that was really where they delivered the result. And the nice part about these is that these are levers that the CEO can play with that are not going to increase your costs, not going to increase your OPEX or your CAPEX. And so the second that, another question that you can ask when you're working with the CEO is, when you came in and you became the new CEO, what metrics did you change? How did you change how success was defined? Did you change the success metrics in the business? If they're not changing the success metrics, they probably aren't, they're probably missing part of the skill set that you would need to drive peak performance in the organization. Here's another one, which is very close to home because, I think retail is a big part of the GDP of the Middle East. And obviously Dubai also could be known as the city of shopping malls. So there's a big retail component that's very vibrant here in the region. And so this was basically a company that had the opposite problem of the construction business. They had a top line issue. Top line growth had slowed. So they started to work, the CEO and the chief commercial officer started working together, and they said, hey, when people start, if you start your shift, you make a sale within the first 60 minutes, you're more likely to make 2, 3, 4, 5 more sales throughout your shift because you've got the momentum going. And the other thing they looked at is that their conversion rate was already really high. So in a retail shop, a good conversion rate, does anybody know what a good conversion rate would be? Anyone? Any retail people here? I mean, if you have a store and your conversion rate is more than 16%, I would say you're doing pretty good. If you're doing over 20%, you'd be like phenomenally good, which means that for every 100 people that come in your store, 20 people buy something. They were already up at 30%. So that's a very good number. What did they do now to
I thought it's 3% chain.
Pardon?
I thought it will be like 3%.
3%. So you're a digital guy. So if you're running an online shop and you got 3%, that would be super high. Because, so for example, this is a lingerie shop. So, you and I are not going to go into the lingerie shop unless we already know we're buying, something for our wife, or hopefully only for our wives. But you won't go in otherwise, right? You'll feel very uncomfortable to go in the store. So that's one. If you look at, for example, Virgin Record Store or something like that, they'll do about 16%. A lot of these companies, like a DJ Sharaf or something, that you're buying a new TV, so you would go and walk into the store. You can have grocery stores which will have a much higher conversion rate because you don't go to the grocery store unless you're buying some food. So it really depends also on the segment. But online, it drops down. If you're doing an online shop and you have a 1% or a 2% conversion rate, that's very high for an online concept. I don't know if there's any online people here who contest what I'm saying, but the interesting,
there was a study chain on it, and you're right on the money on it. I wish I had that study with me today. So the study states that 3% of the individuals, they're ready to buy online, when they go online, and they have their mindset is already set to go and purchase something specific. So that's what it is.
Right. And this is a really key thing, because so if I'm sitting with somebody who's running an online shop and the guy starts telling me how great they are and how great they're doing, and then I ask him his conversion rate, and the guy says, oh, our conversion rate is 20%. This is a true story. I'm sitting on an airplane, guy's telling me how great he is on online, and he says his online store is doing 20%. Right away, I become extremely suspicious that this guy is not really involved in the business, because that doesn't make sense to have a 20% conversion rate online. And then, you start to ask him a couple more questions, which we'll get into, and you quickly realize that this guy has no clue. He doesn't have P&L responsibility, and he's really kind of has a limited span of control within the business. So this particular brand, they realized that every 1% of your conversion rate for them equaled $35 million in sales. And this is a really easy question that you can ask a CEO is, if I increase your conversion rate by 2%, what would the impact be on your top line or your bottom line? 95% of the CEOs that are working within the region who are running retail businesses don't know the answer to that question. And actually, if you walk around the shopping malls, most of the shops don't have the technology in place to count how many people are coming into the store. So they're actually not even monitoring their conversion rate, let alone looking at optimizing it. And so what these individuals really quickly realize is that we want to have a series of freelance salespeople that we can call once if there's a rush, and they would monitor as soon as the conversion rate dropped below 30%. They felt that it meant that there wasn't enough sales staff to help the customers. The customer comes in, you know, I'm looking for a piece of lingerie. I need assistance. I'm not getting assistance. I leave. I'm going to go to La Vie en Rose or wherever whatever the next store is. I'm not a specialist in this area. So the 3% increase in your conversion rate delivered 105 million USD in top line sales. So again, a very real example of how understanding your metrics really is going to drive performance across your organization. I don't know, Ziad, if you're agreeing.
Well, I mean, there are two things I'd like to just comment on that. Sometimes most companies, the data that they use to measure the matrix is not correct, in my view. So they need to check that, because either it was prepared by accountants who don't understand the operations, or it's been, as you said, inherited and no one reviewed it in that sense. So there are two things you should look at and so on. Now, to me also, I mean, just take top line, bottom line is not enough, because we used to do marginal costing for incremental sales. So it goes basically, I can sell it at lower price because my overheads are already charged to my full production per year. So I can go in and give a bigger discount and can make more incentives. So suppose I produce 100 units a year, overhead is 20%. If I produce 120, my overhead is not 20% anymore. So for example, if you look at the pharmaceuticals, when they don't give you discount, they give you credit. And the end user believes that's a good deal. So I would say for every 10 boxes of masks, I'll give you another 1 box. And you think you're getting 10% discount. No, you're not, because the extra 10% does not have you're not depreciating completely, because basically their margin for them is substantially less. So if you work it out, probably it's about 5.5 or 6%, depending on the company that we're talking about. So any CEO should understand these things and go for them. When we did the IVF business, Shane, I had 2 things I used to do. On conversion, I used to sit down with the staff, doctors, nurses, front desk, receptionists, managers, whatever it is. And we used to go through technically every Thursday afternoon to see who came in, why did not make a decision, which doctor did they see, and we went further. So for example, if a Middle Eastern woman does not want to see a foreign doctor, then we'd find her a Middle Eastern doctor who's a woman, for example. If they could not communicate very well, then we eventually had people who, you know, with like 17 languages we can provide at the reception so we can explain things. And when we looked at the process, which to a lot of people is very simple, to me, it's basically matrices and measuring an engineering process, because medicine is really an engineering process. This is why we didn't go in hospitals. They did later, which I think is not a wise decision, because hospitals have higher overheads and higher liability, whereas a day surgery, they go in and out, so you can utilize your overhead substantially higher. So when we looked, for example, at, in the case, I'm just giving the example of IVF, of egg retrieval, where you try to retrieve eggs from a woman to create an embryo. They used to come in anytime between 9 and 11. So we stopped that. We let them come in between 7 and 8:30, because the operating theater would be free later to perform proper procedures that you can charge the client more. Then we looked at every aspect of getting a couple pregnant, and we found out that we can increase the revenue generated substantially by giving them supplements, or doing more scanning for them, or monitoring their cholesterol level, or getting them ready to get pregnant. So your average spend went from about 28 to 35,000. In Dubai, went to about 48,000, and in Abu Dhabi further, because the requirements there are different in a sense. Emiratis would get 3 goes as getting pregnant, as compared to Dubai, only 1 after 2 failures in their own hospitals and so on. So we dug deeper into matrices, and this is how we pushed the numbers. And when I took over, they were doing about 14 million turnover. The first year we went up to 163 million turnover, because we opened Abu Dhabi and Al Ain, and we introduced all these measurements and matrices, very focused marketing and and follow-up approach. And the year after, almost 250 million with a very good margin. So what we're saying is not just this is how we measure things. No, you should question how you are measuring things, because you could be missing lots of other value items that you did not include in your matrix.
Right, outside of the financial metrics, absolutely. So I guess you're driving a point even further, that you really need to be in the minutia of the details and have a bespoke set of metrics that you're using.
Absolutely. And again, for example, I mean, if certain things, if people want extra assurances and so on, and you tell them, look, if you're really worried about your pregnancy, you don't have to do a scan every 2 months. You can have it every 2 months, and I'll give you 50% discount, for example. You know, so they will do that. I mean, of course, the other thing that we've done is we renegotiated the margins or the compensation or the premium for items or procedures covered by insurance companies, because we looked at that. For example, in the case of the IVF, they used to look at an embryo selection process, which at its peak used to cost like 8,000 dirhams, as only a blood test. Therefore, they should only reimburse you for 300 dirhams. But it's not, because you know the equipment you invest is like $1.5 million just to look at the right embryo and selection and stuff. So it goes beyond. Now, when we looked at the business also, when you want to look at the performance of the business, of course, in our case, there was a lot of insurance payments that were rejected. So the biggest theme that I had was the pre-audit for the insurance claims and post-audit for the insurance claims. And that dropped the rejection rate from about 37% to just under 3%. Now, when you're doing like 20 million a month, you can imagine how that will affect your balance sheet and your cash flow and your P&L. So it's not just looking at one number. You have to look at the whole thing and just dissect it, in my view.
So Ziad's really displaying the kind of behavior that you want in a CEO interview. So you can see how he's actually pulling us through the material. And you ask a simple question, you know, are financial metrics important? And then, you know, he says, yeah, financial metrics are important, but business metrics are important. And and he starts giving you examples about going into detail, the languages at the front desk, the time that people come in for procedures, how he's managing his insurers. And so you almost have to pull him back if you were actually, not that you'd be interviewing Ziad for a job, because he's got his own investment company, but if you were, you would really have to pull him back. The reverse of that behavior is, well, can you give me an example, Shane? What do you mean by that question? And you really are on the other end of the interview. You're pulling the candidate through the interview, or you're trying to pull the candidate through the material, and that's not the kind of behavior that you want. That's also indication that you don't have the right candidate. And so just if you guys were interested in this, this is where the material is coming from. This is our book, the CEO assessment, which will be launched at the conference on November 1st and November 3rd. And you can see that it's actually ranked as one of the #1 Google searches, organic searches on Google, if you Google CEO assessment selection. Which was an interesting result. So if you wanted to get that, you can just let us know, and we'll give you free shipping if you buy directly from us. Of course, if you're more comfortable, you can buy it from Amazon. But all the questions that we're going to be asking or covering is covered here. The only other person who's competing for us in this space for the top ranking is Harvard Business Review. So it was an interesting result. But let's move on to the financial metrics. Please do contact me if you want a copy of the book. So what kind of financial metrics should we be looking at? And so in my business, if you want to know if someone's running a search firm, they really should know what's the average revenue per biller. They should know what the average cost per full-time employee is. They should know what the revenue per staff per office. I don't know what you think about the hospital one, Ziad. I always feel.
I mean, what I've done, Shane. I mean, what I've done two things. I mean, I had not just a P&L, but also a balance sheet for every doctor, because again, there's the cost involved, there's liability, there is performance, there is range of clients, there is reputation, there's branding. You know, we looked at that. So I had a P&L and a balance sheet, but mainly P&L. But we technically a balance sheet also that we used, and we also use that to put an incentive package for them further. And it's not a matter, you do 20 patients an hour and you get no. It's just we had an incentive for the ones who can ensure. Hello. Sorry, I heard some. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I think you're fine.
Yeah. So what we've done is some of the people who can add value and improve the business, as in train and supervise and ensure higher quality of performance. I used to give them an incentive to overlook others and ensure that everything is done to their standards, and to increase the performance of some of them. For example, the high performers, we dedicated a whole operating theater for them, because their patients are in and out like almost 16 hours a day. In that sense, their consultation rooms, for example, I've added 3 for each of the seniors, so they can see in 1 hour 3 patients without waiting for them to go in and out. And I had a scriber next to them to take the notes, the medical notes, instead of them dictating of what is happening. So you can see how we improve the process to ensure that 1 hour, the revenue goes from, let's say, barely a consultation, possibly to 2 consultations and maybe a procedure, because a procedure is like 18,000 dirhams, a consultation is 400 dirhams. These are the kind of things you need to look at, but at the same time, ensuring that there is no compromise on quality.
So, yeah, and so when I interview a lot of the hospital CEOs and I ask them, what's your revenue per doctor? A lot of them don't know that number. Don't you think at the end of the day, that's what the hospital's selling? You're selling your doctor.
Absolutely. But if you look at any other business, if you're manufacturing, you will look at your revenue per asset, and your assets are your doctors. Of course, your nurses and support and so on, but your doctors are the frontline income generator asset. You have to maximize that. You have to promote them. And again, keeping that in mind, Shane, when we knew they're going to, at some stage, sell the business, I had to de-risk the business in the sense that it was not dependent on 1 or 2 or 3 doctors. We went from 2 to 38 in less than 3 years that were high performers and generating revenue. None of them generated more than 500,000 dirhams a year, for example. We measured it very precisely. Some of them could generate 3 and 4 million a year, but we were very precise on what quality and how do we complement and how do we increase value in what we're doing. So we also had dietitians, we had psychologists, we had all sorts of people to increase the value chain, and no one will go anywhere else because they think we are guaranteed a good result there, basically.
So the CEOs that don't know the revenue per doctor, disqualify them, sack them, but they're not going to optimize your revenue or your profits.
No.
Unless some of that, you're also in a segment where some of the hospitals are not trying to generate profit, which is nothing. So banking.
But Shane, can I just add to that?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you're looking at profit or revenue. You're looking at efficiency of use of your assets, and it doesn't mean only you measure it as a P&L, because you want to see if that amazing doctor is only working 2 hours, and you can see if you're in a charity, for example, you can see 20 patients instead of 2 or 5, for example. And I'll give you one specific example, and I won't mention the clinic that was one of our main competitors. The doctors only worked from 9 till 5 days a week. And my comment was, women don't get pregnant only between 9 and 5 days a week. You have to see them on Saturdays and Sunday, maybe not Sunday, but you have to be open, and you have to be, because if they're working, they cannot come to see you during that. So you're losing on that patient because they go somewhere else. But these are the kind of things that are not purely financial, they're operational, they're logical, they're strategic.
Lost opportunities, in other words.
Yes.
Yeah, but I think what he's also saying, though, is that it's not just about profit. Profit is one of the underlying drivers for quality of patient care. And so when you have a not-for-profit hospital and the doctor doesn't care about these metrics, he's not going to be able to see as many patients. He will not be utilizing his surgery rooms properly. He won't be utilizing his equipment properly. And so the overall quality of patient care given to the patient will actually suffer. Well, these CEOs will say, well, I don't care about profit, I care about quality of patient care. But because you're ignoring profit, your quality of patient care is actually dropping. I think that's the point he's making.
And so all in all is like the business insights, whether operational or financial. In other words, is that right, Ziad?
Well, I mean, you can't just look at one strategy. I mean, all the strategies have to run in parallel, in my view, in a complementary way, not sequentially. So your business strategy, your marketing strategy, your branding strategy, your IT strategy, your financial strategy, everything has to click. I mean, of course, HR strategy, because most businesses, the most important thing are the people and so on.
Absolutely.
So it has to be, it's not just one. And usually, historically, CEOs come from a specific background. Unfortunately, most of them in the Middle East come from a sales type thing. So they miss on the production. And every businesses we had, I used to take them on what I call educational route. I mean, when we did the audit on one of the big companies that went bust, I used to take the new CFO and take him to the site and say, please get your shoes dusty and dirty so you see what a construction site is like. Because if you don't, let me tell you where they cheat you. You go and build the equipment and then you move it to another site. And that's fraud, basically. And that's what happened in most companies. So unless you understand how it works, you cannot audit. You cannot just look at an ERP system and say, my system says I have 25,000 cranes. No, you don't. You have 5 of them moved around 25,000 times, for example. And these are the kind of things they have to look at. And the same in healthcare. Healthcare, it does not have to be for profit, but your efficiency, efficacy, and compliance has to be a priority too, and not just use that as an excuse to say, I only see patients between 9 and 5 because I'm not making a profit. No, you have to see patients to make them better and help them.
Gotcha.
So here's a couple just, industry benchmark metrics. Obviously, as Ziad's pointing out, you want to be working with a CEO who's making bespoke, tailor-made metrics that's going to give them a competitive edge in the industry. But the other thing is that if you're in the talent business like I am, or if you're reporting to Ziad and you're his head of talent acquisition, and say, he's running a food and beverage business and he wants a GM for the food and beverage business, you can bring him the candidates, but then you better have good candidates or he's going to probably slit your throat. But you also want to say, hey, Ziad, by the way, did you know these are the top 3 most profitable restaurants, and the best performer has 6 table turns, and this is how they're doing it. So inside these metrics are actually hidden the winning strategies to drive your revenue and drive your profitability. And so because you're the one who's interviewing them, you will have access to very proprietary information if you incorporate these metrics into your assessments. And will allow you to be a much better partner, rather than saying, hey, I can give you your GM for your food business, or can I partner with you to help improve your strategy, improve your vision of how we're going to beat the competition. And that's what's hidden in here. And so exactly when a CEO doesn't know their metrics, they're also highlighting that they're probably not that strategic. They're probably not that competitive. They're probably lacking on the results orientation. The reason why Ziad is, and I haven't ever assessed him, but, my hypothesis would be the reason why he's pushing heavy into the metrics. And for him, he clearly said these are not even enough metrics for him. You have to have, outside of finance, because he has a high results orientation. He just doesn't want to run an IVF clinic. He wants to run an IVF clinic that's generating more revenue, more net profit, delivers, better quality patient care, that sees more patients than any other clinic that's in a comparable size or benchmark. And that's also what's being highlighted by a very simple question. What are the financial metrics you're looking at? We're understanding the strategic orientation of the candidate, the results orientation of the candidate, and their management skills. So a lot of interesting things just come from very simple questions. So somebody who is not able to answer these questions, they have a myriad of other issues, and a big one is not understanding the value of your cash flow. And this can allow you, so for example, some of my competitors they lack in this area. And so, for example, when you do a CEO search, 30 to 40% of those searches will never be completed because it's a family business and they're going to appoint their son as a CEO, or, they have an internal candidate that they placed, or they're shutting the business down, or they're changing strategy, whatever it is. So if you factor in the fact that 40% of your assignments never pay the final fee, what's the actual net present value of the cash flow of your contract? If it's $100,000, you know, it's not $100,000. It's because you have a 40% chance that you know, 40% of that is could go up in smoke. So when you're discounting or when you're pricing your product or service, if you don't understand your net present cash flow, someone else who has a better grip of it will get a competitive advantage on you on the pricing, and will knock you out. And this is just one example. I don't know, what do you think of the ills, Ziad, of not being on top of this aspect?
Well, I mean, you cannot lead and you cannot succeed, and the world's becoming more difficult. I mean, every time we get a new black swan hitting us, if it's in the market or in the world or in the economy or in the system. So you can't just say, but I'm an expert on this. No, you have to be, if you're going to run an organization, you have to understand every aspect. You don't have to be an expert at it, but you should be able to get the answers that you need, and you should be able to judge that the answers and the data that you're given basically is correct. And if you cannot do that, you should not be leading anymore. I mean, the 60s and the 70s were great for music, but the business has changed. You know, we did not have businesses worth billions and trillions. I mean, we have now businesses bigger than the GDP on most middle-sized countries. So you can't just say, but I didn't know. No, you have to know. And it's not enough just to bark orders and threaten to fire people. I mean, call management by screaming and shouting and threatening doesn't work anymore. So you need to have the facts. We have to look at the facts, and they have to be unbiased, verifiable facts by everybody. Otherwise, how can we run them down and explain to the middle managers, this is what we expect from you, if they don't understand what you're talking about, if they don't agree with the way you measure things. So I think this alignment is also very important on factual findings and measurable outcomes. It has to be the case. So what you're saying, absolutely correct, but you know, we need to go down. And this is why when I go into businesses, Shane, I do what I call the Google Earth approach, where I can look at the whole planet Earth and I go down to a ground level. I can tell you who's standing at the window. And if you understand that as a leader, then you can run any business. And this is how I succeeded in sectors that, in principle, I had no clue about. To me, it was just a process and measurement of matrices, basically.
So yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned about the GDP, because I think Apple moved their current account to Ireland, and it created a 25% increase in the IMF calculated that it was responsible for 25% of the increase in GDP of Ireland. They moved their account. So these are crazy times. So which customer account has the highest cost associated with it? Well, a lot of times the CEO can't answer that. They're not really managing their metrics, and you know, make sure that they put the opportunity cost in, because you have a diva client, you have to have your chairman or chairperson, chairwoman, the CEO, the CFO, the chief commercial officer has to go visit them. You know, there's huge costs in the thousands and thousands of dollars associated that rank up. Hopefully it doesn't break into the millions, but it definitely can. And so I want to know, you know, when have you rationalized your client portfolio based on profitability? And a very easy question is just, you know, what's your most profitable SKU? What's your most profitable product or service? And you notice that Ziad was highlighting that. It's like, you know, one of the things that he had to do was to make sure that the surgery rooms are open for the most profitable procedures at the time when people are most likely to have those profitable procedures. You don't want to be having an unprofitable procedure. And so, of course, he would fall, you know, right into this. It's not pre-planned, but, you know, he's volunteering this information. And that's, again, what you want to see in your interview. If you're wrestling it out of the CEO, if you're like, no, but what was the most profitable? Can you give me, this is what I mean. And you're really pushing it, you're re-explaining it, and you're re-asking the question, it's because they don't have what it takes. They don't know the answer. This is a very interesting question here, for me anyway. You know, how much revenue do you need to take 1% of the market share? The second he doesn't know the answer to that, or she doesn't know the answer to that, you know that they haven't calculated what the total market share dollar value of the market is. And then it brings into question, again, your vision skills, your strategic skills, because you're saying, I'm going to increase revenue by 10%. Well, does that mean you need to take 20% of the market or 0.5% of the market? And that would also have a big impact, and it would also dictate what your go-to-market strategy is. How are you going to execute on that goal to increase your revenue by X amount? And if the CEO doesn't know the answer to this, very quickly you get into it, you ask 3 or 4 questions, and you have a very good idea of whether this person has a grip on their business or not. And you notice that I never ask questions like, tell me about yourself, or, give me a little rundown on your experience. I do not waste time with that. Do not ask those questions. You want to ask what we call separator questions. So, hey, I'm sitting on a plane, I'm sitting on a train, I'm sitting on a bus, I'm sitting wherever, and the guy's just sitting beside me having a coffee. And it would sound like a very innocent question, but it's not, because I'm sizing the guy up right away. So I'm just going to say, oh, you're in the laptop business. Oh, if how much revenue is 1% of that market, or what's the size of your market share? And you can't answer it. The guy doesn't know what's going on. I don't know if you agree or disagree with that, Ziad, but.
No, agreed. I mean, you have to understand your competitive landscape, because if you don't understand it, you're living in vacuum, and you might waste resources and efforts and money and capital, especially in startups, that you're barking up the wrong tree and you have no clue what is happening. I mean, your head is so buried in the sand, you don't see the real world, and you can't do that. It's other people's money. And I always say, if it's my money, I can do what the hell I want. If it's other people's money, I have to be held accountable. And you have to be held accountable. This is why when we talk about the financial crises, where government poured in hundreds of billions and dollars in the banking system, and when I see a bank not making money and the CEO is getting a bonus of 30 million, I say, go and shoot them. Not allowed, should not be the case, So they have to understand the competitive landscape. They have to, but if they add value, you have to compensate them very well, but not more than the shareholders, in my view.
Right, yeah, absolutely. And the other question that comes on the back of this one is, where would you get that market share? So which market share is loose? So if you deal with a very aggressive CEO, they will start to tell you, 1% of revenue in this market is $15 million. And, the CEO of XYZ company was just terminated, and their customer service has gone down, and the tender for their biggest client is up next month. And, we have a good chance of taking that account or that principal or that from them. And they will sit down and they will target their competitors, and they will know who is weak, which market share is loose. And then you have your regular growth. So the market's growing at 5%, and there's probably another 10 or 15%, where you have client attrition. And each industry has a different rate of client attrition. So you might also ask them, what's your natural client attrition rate in your industry? For banks, it's 4% of customers will switch a bank in a year. So very low. In a hotel business, you have about 90%, 95% attrition rate. So a lot of times when you fly to a city, even though the hotel you stayed at was perfect, the next time you fly that city, you're changing hotels just for the fun of it. So it's very difficult. So in those scenarios, market share is up for grabs. So you want to understand that that's your CEO's job, is to grow the market share, grow the revenue, grow the profit. So they should be looking at this. They should be on top of it. This one, I mean, a lot of the clients I deal with, they don't know this. The annual value of your customer, the lifetime value of your customer, and your client acquisition cost. And, my dad, for example, he bought Cadillacs his whole life. That's the only car he drove. And if you look at the lifetime value, he probably bought something like 6 or 7 Cadillacs through his life. And, what's the value of that? That's huge. But they didn't maintain the loyalty, because the next generation, you can't, Cadillac's not a cool car anymore, unfortunately, So, they didn't take a good point of retaining the customer, or making sure that, why not have your kids driving the same car, or getting that. If you don't have this metric, you can't do your marketing budget properly. So if I don't know what the cost of bringing a client in is, I'm just really kind of willy-nilly throwing marketing budgets in the air. And you'll find that that's what a lot of CEOs are doing. they're saying, oh, sales is down, so I'll allocate another $5 million on marketing. Well, why did you use 5 million? How, and how does that fit into your other metrics? I don't know, Ziad, if you use these metrics or not, but this is
Of
more
course,
on the customer side.
of course. I mean, I measure. We used to measure the revenue on even attendance of conferences on TV and so on to see. We came up with some matrices that, although they are, you come up with them, but you have an indicator. So we tried to measure everything that we did, even the choice. If we build a bigger reception room with more light and different music, how will that affect the decision by the patient to say yes or no? Should we have them? We used to ask them, actually. We used to ask them, what would you like to read if you were here while waiting, just to make them more relaxed before they go into the consultation and so on. So I agree with you. You should come up with all these matrices. Not go crazy, because some of them doesn't make sense. But in my case, I could tell you, even if they take a supplement of vitamin C, how much it adds value to the bottom line. When I was in Arab Tech, I can tell you, if we are late on a project by 1 month, a specific project, how it will affect my share price, because I know what the multiple is, for example. And I used to get the project managers into workshops and explain to them how delaying the accounts will affect them, and indirectly threaten that they're not going to get their bonus, basically. But still, you have to get them engaged. You can't just measure everything on your own, and you have to make sure that the data is correct. So I used to actually go to the sites personally and deal with the junior and middle accountants, so they feel the loyalty is to me, not to the project manager. You have to do all these things. There is no complete checklist for everything you do, and most of the matrices, unless they are specifically measured in your site, they are approximations, and that's good enough, because engineering in general is approximation. Accounting is approximation. You cannot predict 100% everything till past the event. And with the world changing, we can't wait for things to happen before you make a decision.
So this last question here, next year, what will your ratio between legacy customers and net new customers? This is actually from Gene Bliss, who was the chief customer officer for reporting to Bill Gates in Microsoft. And, this for her was a very important metric, because you want to have 80 to 90% of your business from legacy customers, if you're a mature business, and but you still need to make sure that you're hungry and you're bringing in the fresh customer. It's interesting. We don't have time to go into too much because we're running close to the hour here. But this is, again, a very simple question. When you took over as CEO, how did you change the success metrics? The second you're dealing with a CEO who didn't touch them and just used as Ziad was pointing out, we often inherit a legacy set of controls, a legacy set of reports, a legacy set of success metrics, and you run with those. You're not really trying to optimize the business. And then also, as Ziad said, you can't have all of them, but I don't really care. It's not necessarily the ones that I mentioned that are important. I would also just ask them, what are the success metrics you're working on? Now, watch out, because the CEO is not going to say, oh, by the way, I don't use success metrics. I don't believe in them. They'll never say that, because they know that's going to result in a negative result. So they will say, oh yeah, I look at average, we're talking to a hotelier, and I say, well, how do you manage the cost? What metrics do you look at the cost? And he says, oh, I look at, cost per room or whatever it is. They say, okay, over the last 5 years, what has your result been on that metric? What have you done to reduce it? And what is your prediction for that metric for next year? So I don't care what metrics you're using, just as long as you're using whatever metrics you want to use, that's fine, use those. But I want to know, then I'm going to ask you to tell me the numbers. And if the guy's making it up or the lady's making it up, they're going to stutter and they're going to start to think, because they're going to know they can't just throw a number on the table, because if it doesn't make sense. And especially, you never want to look at metrics in isolation. I want to look at the 5-year trend. And as a CEO, I want to see your ability to improve those metrics over the 5 years. And more importantly, I want to see that you've been creating and implementing and executing strategies and tactics to influence those metrics. So, you have a lot of people, for example, of hotels in Mecca right now. Mecca, obviously with COVID, had a very serious impact. What are you now going to do to increase the revenue and the profit orientation in your hotels in Mecca? Well, at least you have a strategy. Obviously, you're not going to have great metrics. Everybody got hit, but at least you have a plan. What is it? And what are the metrics you want to be looking at? And very quickly, you start to realize that even the metrics that a lot of these guys are using are leaving out. They're using RevPAR instead of TrevPAR, and you're not including conferences, for example. You're not including various other elements that you can use to optimize the revenue aspect of the business. And so again, back to Ziad's point is, it's not about the metrics that I showed. It's really understanding that the CEO has made tailor-made bespoke metrics that they feel are important, because you're never going to be a better expert on someone's business than they are. You have someone who's been in the automotive business for 30 years. You're not going to come as an executive search consultant and know the automotive business better than them. So they probably have better metrics. They're going to say, no, when I'm optimizing business, these are the metrics I use. Okay, great. Give me the rundown over the last 5 years and what your prediction for the next 2 years will be on those. And then you'll watch them drop the ball. So even if they know the questions you're going to ask before the interview, they will still drop the ball on these pieces, because it won't fit together. Then you ask them, and the guy says, yeah. I said, okay, show me your dashboard. Show me the management dashboard. I want to see it. And if you're dealing with someone like Ziad, he'll be like, yeah, let me show you. Boom. He'll be excited because he's created it and it's successful and it's exciting and they're passionate about it. And someone who doesn't say, oh, no, I can't show you that, blah, 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 and they start making all kinds of excuses. So that's how I feel about it anyway. And this is really how we would, this would be a big part of, our assessment when we're looking at it. Yeah, I don't know if you have anything to say on those points.
No, this is absolutely. Again, when you're interviewing somebody for a senior leadership position, it's not just what I call the bookkeeping knowledge that they have. It's the attitude, it's the vision, it's the challenge, it's the passion, it's everything together. This is when I interview people for positions. I look not just for the CV. I can challenge, they can convince me, we can say it's okay, we can teach you, but it's the ability to learn and having a vision, open-mindedness, and a strategy for that position. Because if they don't have a strategy and just going in to become administrators, they should not be leading, in my view.
Yeah. And this first question is interesting as well. How do you define success? And if you just took a food and beverage business, if they had just defined success as, 100% repeat business, we'll define success that every person who comes to our restaurant comes back again. They would be they would be super successful. Just think the last time you were at a restaurant and the person invited you to come back. Phil, thanks for coming. When are you coming? Did you know next Friday we have, it's 50% off our steak night. Did you want me to make a booking for you and your wife for Friday night? Have you ever had anyone try to rebook you at the restaurant? What would the increase in that small, just changing the way you define success and that one behavior, what would the change be in your revenue? Massive. So these are the key takeaways when you're running your CEO assessment. And again, as Ziad pointed out, this is a small piece of a much larger puzzle, because when you look at finance, it's not just metrics. You have P&L management, you have balance sheet management, you have M&A, you have inorganic strategy, you have corporate finance. So there's a big skill set there. But this is just looking at the metrics. But when you look at that, it's change your metrics and change your performance. Right away, they started this thing in the US where they're putting the calories on all the menus. And it's the worst thing ever, because you can't enjoy your junk food anymore, because you go into the burger place and it's like, oh, this burger is 2,000 calories. And you're going, whoa, I'm not eating that. And so immediately it changes my behavior because the metrics changed. And there was a country, I'm not going to mention who it is, but you guys would figure it out pretty quick, where the person in charge of that country wanted to change the way the customs people acted. And so they took a camera and they said, this camera goes directly to the house of the person in charge, and they want you to greet everybody, very well into the country. And immediately what happened? all the customers, people had smiles on their faces, and they became one of the #1 custom people in the world. Change the metrics, change the performance. And so that's why, if you see CEOs who aren't changing metrics, you're probably not that interested in changing performance. So, and again, as I said, your metrics, know your business. So those are the main takeaways. If you guys are really interested in this content, I'm really excited that actually Ziad has also agreed to be an instructor in our course. It's the first ever for the entire Middle East CEO certified assessor course that gives you a global certification by SP Jain Global School of Management. And we're going to have professors from SP Jain. We have a professor of behavioral science. I don't know if we need the finance professor anymore now that Ziad's here. We have the CEO of the Dubai campus, and the professor of behavioral sciences is Professor Christopher Abraham. And we have a couple other celebrity CEOs who will be joining. They're just about to confirm their attendance. So this would be an amazing, amazing course if you were able to come. And then, of course, if you want, you can also download some samples of the book, some questionnaire samples from our webpage. And I don't know if you want me to show you quickly the webpage there, if anybody wants. And does anyone have any questions on anything that we've tackled? I wasn't watching the chat box. I don't know if there's anything there. Angela, do we have anybody in the chat box?
Yeah, we have a lot of chatter.
We have a lot of chatter. Okay, so let's access that. This is our website. Click on the resources, and then you can buy the book right here. And the course will be available in November. And so when you go here, you get the free download. You just click that, enter your details, and you should be able to download the book. There you go. And so you get a sample of a question there. So there's 2 samples. I don't know how to get out of this now. And if you go down to the bottom, there's another one for assessing revenue net profit, which we're going to talk about soon. Revenue net profit is, unbelievably, a lot of CEO assessments skip that. Can your CEO make money? Simple question. What's the process? What's the framework that we're going to look at? So what questions should we tackle here from these guys? This is the course. This is what we're covering next week. I think I might have to move these down one session because we're at the HR conference November 1st and November 3rd. So I think next week's session, I don't know if I'll be able to make it or not, but I'll send out a memo on that on Sunday morning. So what was the core questions we should answer here? Anybody? No. So this is one on the leadership. So we're covering leadership next month. So we'll have the leadership question there. Oh, these are just more comments. There's not really any question, is there? Okay.
They're more suggestions. That's what they are, I would say. And
if someone has a question, just raise your hand and we can answer it there. Otherwise, we're going to close out because we're coming up on the hour. Ziad, I want to thank you so much. It was totally awesome listening to you. And I could see, my wife and I own a healthcare clinic, and I was thinking, like, if we had Ziad around, we'd probably make more money. But it was really interesting how you tied to, it's not just about making more money. It's just that when you're looking at driving those efficiency, it's actually the patient who wins, because the patient's getting a better quality of care. They're getting faster level of service, and they're getting access to more resources. And so I really thought that was actually interesting, because I thought you were going to let the not-for-profit hospitals off the hook, and you wouldn't. You're like, no, this is hurting them on the quality of patient care side. And it's such a great point. It's such an excellent point, and I just always love chatting to you. And luckily, you didn't say anything that was going to get me deported, which is always so. Maybe we could do that next time. But thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
I think it was great session, Chain and Ziad. I think it was really great. Again, very insightful. I've learned a lot out of it. That's why I was a bit quiet. And I think there's a lot of value to take home with it. So again, thanks a lot for this session.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And big thanks, Nasser, for co-hosting with me. And thanks for all of our guests. It's been such a pleasure having you all. And we look forward to next week. Is your CEO a rainmaker? How to catch the rainmaker? How to tell the person who can really drive revenue in your business? So here we are on the hour. I already got scolded once by Ziad for not being time conscious. So we'll close the session now. And thank you so much. Thanks, everyone. We'll be in touch.
Thank you.